All right, welcome everybody. I'm so glad to see that you're all here tonight. So I can present the basics of bookkeeping, the strategies for success. And this presentation tonight does focus on basics. So it will, if you're interested in more advanced things, we might have another presentation on that later, but let's get started. So before I talk about bookkeeping in general, let me just explain a little bit about my business. We do focus on using QuickBooks Online in particular. We serve small businesses and nonprofits in the area, and we are what is called an after-the-fact bookkeeping business, which means that we can do everything remotely, and all of our clients do their own invoicing and bill pay, so we step in after that fact and balance their books. We can pull their reports and keep their financial books in order on a regular basis. So today we are going to go over the bookkeeping fundamentals, how to track and organize your money, making sense of your numbers, and then we'll close with a Q&A. So before we actually get into any of the details, I would like for each one of you to first of all think about what comes to mind when you hear the word bookkeeping. How does it actually make you feel? And really give a moment to think internally about those two things. And then after about a second or two, I would like you to turn to your neighbor and share what you're thinking of. What does bookkeeping make you think of, and how does it make you feel? And we have about 60 seconds to do that. Go ahead. So what do you think of when you hear the word bookkeeping?
Anxiety.
Anxiety. Mm-hmm. Okay, 5 more seconds. And time is up. Excellent. So if anybody has like single words that they'd like to share with us, so I can get a feel for how we're feeling about bookkeeping before we have the presentation. Anybody want to share their words? Anxious, I hear anxious. Tedious, that's a good one. Okay, so the goals for today, number 1 is to lower your stress when it comes to bookkeeping. Number 2 is to understand what money and to track and why. To learn how to organize your information about your money effectively. And to see how bookkeeping will support your business. So why bookkeeping matters? There's a lot of whys that are behind the scenes, but when good bookkeeping happens on a regular basis, you can make better decisions on how to track your money, what to do about it, and make smart choices. You can be ready for taxes before the end of the year with very organized records. There's no clamoring at the end of the year and panicking. You get financial clarity to give a clear picture of your business financials. And you then are in a position to be able to grow your business because you know what your finances are. You know if you're making a profit and how much. So bookkeeping fundamentals. First of all, I want to highlight right here, the cardinal rule is when you start a business to make sure that you separate your personal finances from your business finances. Oftentimes, when you're first starting a business, you put your own money into the business, and that's okay. That's called owner investment. So you start out with that, but then you do want to keep a separate business bank account, and if you need a charge account for certain expenditures, you make sure it's a separate charge card than what you're putting your personal expenses on. It doesn't have to be a business charge card though, because they do cost more money. It can be a personal type of charge card. Just make sure that you're only charging business expenses on that card. So you want to track your money in, and I'm specifically using terms that aren't the financial guru type terms. We could be, a lot of times when people look at financial records and financial reports and all these fancy terms, their eyes glaze right over. So if you see the term revenue or income, it's just money coming into your business and money going out. You want to think about the different kinds of money that goes out of your business. What kinds of expenses? Payroll, subscriptions for all the software packages that we all need nowadays. Taxes, those are all money out. Assets are things that you own, such as equipment, vehicles, or other business property, like even a desk for your office. And then liabilities, that's where the credit card comes into account. Gift cards are another thing. I have a few like massage therapy clients that use a lot of gift cards. When your business sells gift cards to people, that's a liability because you haven't yet supplied the service to them. So you need to track that money that you owe that will eventually be cashed in. And then if you take any loans out, these things all need to be tracked in your bookkeeping. So how to track your money? There are, many ways to track your money. The first way would be the paper ledger. For centuries, bookkeeping has been done by paper and with pencil. Another way, more modern way, is spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are great because it can do a lot of your math for you by using the formulas. And then, of course, there is accounting software. I don't know how many of you recognize even what this picture is. I might be dating myself, but this is how I always used to keep track of my personal finances, was with a checkbook and a checkbook ledger. Nowadays, many people don't even have checkbooks, but that was one way of tracking finances. And then this is a picture of a ledger sheet, a paper and pencil ledger sheet. So here are spreadsheets. That is a way that I actually recommend for businesses that are just starting out. So a lot of times when businesses start out, they don't have a lot of capital, they don't have any extra money to spend, and using spreadsheets like this is a very effective way of tracking their expenses and their income. And as a matter of fact, the spreadsheets that I'm showing here on the screen are Google Sheets that at the end, if you're interested, you can scan the QR code and get a copy of these spreadsheets. It's just a simple template, but sometimes if you're just getting started, it helps to have a little bit of a framework to be able to work with. So when you're using spreadsheets, you want to separate your incomes and log everything and certain amounts of data, such as the date, and actually I have another slide that will go over what to track exactly. And then accounting software. Even though my company only uses QuickBooks Online, there are plenty of other software companies out there, and they all have their merits. I'm not an expert in any of them, so I can't even tell you a comparison. The only one that I do know is QuickBooks Online, but I know there's plenty of people that really like some of these other softwares as well. I think I skipped a slide. There we go. Okay, so as showed on the spreadsheet, the things that you need to track in whatever method you use are dates, like specific dates. Like let's say you get paid by a client with a check, and there's a date on the check. So you might want to track the date that the check was written, but then you also might want to track the date that you actually deposited it in your bank. Then you're also going to make sure that you're tracking it in a proper place. And if it's money in, track it in the income spreadsheet. And if it's money out, track on the expenses. And that might seem like a very simple thing, but if you're not thinking about that and you put it on the wrong sheet, I see some head nodding. So it's these basic things. It's very important to remember to put them in the right place. You do want to track the payee, and the payee could be either who got paid, as in who you paid, and also who paid you. So you want to keep track of all your clients, and you also want to keep track of your vendors. And then, of course, you're going to write down the amount. And then this next thing at the bottom is category. And the category is what makes things fun. Okay, common categories. Sales revenue, service income, depending on what kind of business you're in. Other income that might not be your direct business income, but like a side shoot of your business income. Or you could get really more detailed, and in like my business, I track separately my recurring monthly income, and then I track my project income, which is less predictable. So I want to know how much I make on a regular predictable amount, and then other amounts that that might be a certain time of year comes in at certain times. You want to be able to predict what you're going to make. Expense categories. These are just a few. I've seen some charts of accounts that are this long, so this is just listing the most common types of expenses. But cost of goods sold. Cost of goods sold is an item that goes into the actual product that you sell to your client. If I was selling flowers to a client, and those foam things that you stick the flowers into, and I had to buy a bunch of those, that would be a cost of goods sold because it's something I buy, and then it's part of what I actually sell to my client. This is an important category to track because it shows up as decreasing your income directly, as opposed to seeing your income and then expenses after. Advertising and marketing. So that means any business cards that you buy or merch that you want to give to your clients. It also can be advertisements in magazines, all kinds of things like that. Your membership to the chamber can be in the category of advertising and marketing. Your bank and merchant fees is, like Andrew knows, is any movement of money nowadays. If it's moving digitally, there is going to be a merchant fee, whether it's your bank or PayPal or Stripe or MX Merchant, that goes in its own category. Then if you're paying any freelancers, it's category. Dues and subscriptions, office supplies, payroll, taxes and payroll, professional services like a lawyer or an accountant or a bookkeeper. Rent, utilities, repairs and maintenance to your office, your home office, travel, meals, and vehicle expenses. There are all types of expenses. But why is that important? Is because when you categorize your expenses, then you can pull those money together in the categories and report on them to know exactly what you're spending your money on and which areas are more expensive than other areas. And you can pull together the reports that you'll see on the next slide. So when you do this, you can actually figure out, am I making a profit? Can I afford to hire somebody? Those are the important kinds of decisions that these pieces of data help you with. So using this data that is categorized from categories, you can pull them together into these two most important reports for businesses: the profit and loss and the balance sheet. The profit and loss shows activity for a period of time, and it's called activity because it's movement of money. Money in, money out. The balance sheet, on the other hand, is a snapshot of your financial position at any point in time. And in this report shows your assets, your liability, and your equity. Here is a profit and loss. Activity over time. It's a simplified one. So at the top of a profit and loss, and this is any profit and loss, is where you have your income at the top. Your expenses are in the lower portion of the report. And at the very bottom is the difference between the two, whether it's positive or negative. So starting out with this income at $4,297, then directly taken out of the income is the cost of goods sold. So then you get your gross profit, which is the income minus the cost of goods sold. In the expenses, you see your categories, which helps a business owner figure out where to focus their efforts. If they want to budget themselves. If they look at their subscriptions and they say, wow, that's a lot of money that I'm spending on software. Do I really need to spend that much money on that software? And then at the bottom, the gross profit minus the gross expenses to come up with the net income at the bottom of the report. The balance sheet, on the other hand, is showing things such as a checking account and a savings account. So you know how your checking account and savings account, the balance changes on a daily basis. So that's why this is specifically a snapshot in time on a certain day. So the balance on February 28th in this sample account is showing on these reports. And then it's also going to show you the balance on the credit card account at that point in time. And then any loans, any equity, and then at the end of the year, you'll see retained earnings for how much money has stayed in the business, not been taken out and reinvested in anything else, but stayed in the business at the end of the year. Okay, so when should you do some of this bookkeeping? Whether it's in spreadsheets and entering the data for the month or whatever, or if it's using something like QuickBooks. My friend Brenna suggested this, saying it's like cleaning your house. If you do a little bit every day, you won't end up with 7 hours of laundry, which we know happens. So a little bit by a little bit is how you minimize the stress. Either that or hire a bookkeeper who does things a little bit by a little bit each period of time. So if you do it a little bit each week or a little bit each month even, it will actually lower your stress level. So at this point, I'm wondering if your feelings or thoughts about bookkeeping has changed at all. So please take 30 seconds and turn to your neighbors and talk to your neighbor to see if this has changed. Did anybody's feeling about bookkeeping change at all? Even a little bit? I see some no. Thank you. Oh, excellent. Okay. So good. So it's confirmation that you're doing the right thing. Excellent. Glad to hear it. Okay, so in conclusion, I have a QR code up here. If you would like a copy of that Google Sheets that you saw, you can scan this code and it will make a copy on your Google Drive. Are there any questions about basics of bookkeeping? Brenna?
What's a 1099?
So a 1099 is a form that the IRS requires for any contractor that makes $600 or more in one calendar year. So yes, I get quite a few 1099s from each of my clients. And I also, as a bookkeeper, it's my job to make sure that my clients are sending 1099s to any of the vendors that they need to send them to. So this is for independent contractors. Thanks, Brenna. Yes, Kate.
So why are the cost of goods sold removed in the revenue side and not on the expense side if you're spending that money? Why is that not an expense?
It's a different way of looking at it because it's something that you purchase and then it's an expense that goes directly to your client, as opposed to an expense such as rent. That doesn't, your client has nothing to do with your rent.
So it benefits the client more so where your expenses benefit you and your business.
Yes. So that's a direct expense to the client, whereas the business has its own expenses. Good question.
Does that draw out, furthering this question, does that draw out, I don't have a problem, but does that draw out your way to assess how much of your actual profit from those clients makes sense to your business because you're pulling that number out?
It is, yes, it's all part of that equation in figuring out your profit percentage. Yes. Kevin.
Just curious, what's your recommendations in terms of when someone should seek, getting a bookkeeper? So, so I know my stuff is kind of relatively simple, but I know just kind of talking to you, like, when you have employees and all that. So what is your kind of like checklist and when you say that it's time to move from trying to do it or doing it yourself to actually getting a bookkeeper to do it for you?
You know when it's time to hire a bookkeeper when your business is doing well enough that you can afford it is one of the things. The other thing is that you just don't have enough time because you're spending all of your time doing the business of your business and your bookkeeping is getting neglected. And, oh, right, I see some head nods. So that's a big key indicator right there. And another one would be if things are getting so complicated in your business, expense, and maybe you're purchasing equipment and you're not sure how to deal with that in the books. That's another indicator to say it's time to hire a bookkeeper. Yep, if tax time is so stressful because of all of the above, and sometimes your tax professional will say, oh, you should have been doing this all along, but you're like, oh, I didn't know that. That's another indicator.
Probably a good segue into my question. This might be more of an accounting question, but is there a difference in the way you keep your books if you're on a cash basis versus an accrual basis?
There is a difference in how your reports are generated, cash versus accrual, not necessarily in how you keep your books. No. Yep.
And for, I guess, software as it relates to keeping track of your books, what's your difference between Quicken and like Quickbooks? Like, what's the difference in terms of like the functionality?
Sure. That's a good question. So Quicken is designed to be a personal financial management system. So it doesn't track as much detail. It doesn't have as much reporting capabilities. I'm also not really very familiar with Quicken. So I wonder, can you pull a profit and loss and a balance sheet from Quicken?
I mean, I just like started using it maybe like a year ago, just kind of playing around with it because I'm the old school. I do like the spreadsheet stuff.
Sure.
I don't got that much going on. It's like I don't have employees and all that.
Right.
It's relatively easy to do, but just to automate, just like you say, the categories, like that's where I want to get to, where I don't have to think. You pay for something, especially something you do often, you just get
Sure.
sorted. So I did see that it does have like the ability to do like a statement on there, but again, I just do stuff pretty much in Excel with this. But that's how.
I honestly don't know. I do know that many accountants won't accept reports from Quicken because of the lack of detail. So, but I have an advanced spreadsheet version that I can share with you if you'd like to see an advanced one that actually does automate creating a profit and loss and a balance sheet from the spreadsheets. So, yes?
What's the biggest misconception you're constantly fighting when people talk to you about bookkeeping services?
That's a good question. Misconception.
That you're an accountant?
Yes, that they think I do taxes. And so my first response is, I'm sorry, I don't do taxes, but I prepare your books so that when you do see your tax professional, it's so easy. All you have to do is give them their reports.
Do you work with all of your clients on a monthly basis, or do you also do quarterly?
That's a good question. Yeah. I do have a couple of quarterly clients that need very, very little attention. And honestly, most of those quarterly clients were because they were just starting their business. And then as their business grows, then they transition to monthly. Okay, I think that about wraps it up. So thank you very much, everyone, and thank you.